evening. The Prime Minister is spending a second night in intensive care, being treated for coronavirus. But Downing Street said today he was in good spirits, having been admitted to hospital originally on Sunday evening. Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, who is deputising for the Prime Minister, said Mr Johnson is in a stable condition. He's been given oxygen, but he's not on a ventilator. The Queen has sent a message of support to Mr Johnson's family, including his partner, Carrie Simons, who's expecting their child. Now, the latest official figures on the spread of coronavirus show that 786 have died in hospital. That is the highest reported so far for a 24-hour period. But experts do say that the growth in numbers is actually lower than the predicted long-term trend. And it brings the total number of deaths in UK hospitals to more than 6,000. The government admitted today that the UK could indeed learn lessons from Germany on testing and on finding a way out of the crisis. Well, first, let's join our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg, at Westminster.
Well, Hugh, when we talked this time last night, there was a real sense of shock here in Westminster, and I'm sure around the country too. It was only a couple of hours that we'd learned that the Prime Minister had been moved to intensive care, struggling with the symptoms of coronavirus. Now, he's still in intensive care tonight, but I think it's important to note and to say that his symptoms have not been getting worse. It seems he has not been deteriorating while in hospital. The government, that said, is insisting that business is going on as much as usual as possibly can be. The government machine is still whirring and ticking away. But still, there are questions about exactly how they are managing with the leader absent. It is still a time of profound political and practical pressure. Nothing stops the spring, but the country's on pause, not knowing how deep this crisis will really cut, if the Prime Minister himself will recover. After a night for Boris Johnson in intensive care, the Foreign Secretary in his place at the lectern.
Well, 2 more NHS doctors have died after testing positive for coronavirus. Dr. Anton Sebastian Pila, who was in his 70s, died in Kingston Hospital in southwest London on Saturday. It's believed he came out of retirement to help the NHS at this time. And tributes have also been paid to what friends call the dearly loved heart surgeon, Jitendra Rathod, who died yesterday, described as a great surgeon, worked at the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff for a quarter of a century. Now, the first coronavirus patients have arrived at the new NHS Nightingale Hospital at the Excel Centre in East London. The temporary field hospital, which was officially opened last week, can accommodate up to 4,000 patients. It's the first of several such facilities planned across the UK. Medical leaders from across the UK have urged people with any urgent and serious health conditions to continue to seek help during this pandemic. In a statement, the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, which monitors patient care, said the NHS remains open and the public should not hold back from getting medical assistance if needed. Now, while the London region has seen the highest number of deaths and confirmed cases in the UK, the Midlands has seen a sharp rise in infections. The Mayor of the West Midlands has insisted that the region's hospitals are prepared. The wider Midlands region is a particular area of concern to the government, according to ministers, with a total of just under 1,200 deaths there so far. Our correspondent Sean Lloyd picks up the story.
At the moment, distressing to watch, a 37-year-old nurse struggling for breath in intensive care. At 29 weeks pregnant, Michelle Wright doesn't know where she contracted the virus, but feels compelled, she says, to send a message to those who are still not following advice aimed at halting its spread. Please, listen to government advice. Social distancing. Keep yourself and your families as safe as possible. A new facility to help cope with the sharp rise in cases in the Midlands is being prepared. This Nightingale Hospital on the outskirts of Birmingham will admit its first patients in 5 days' time. And testing is being increased. A new centre at the Edgbaston Cricket Ground opened just yesterday. The wider Midlands region has recently been described as of particular concern by the government, and a spike in the number of deaths is being investigated.
Those involved in coordinating the response on the ground say they currently have enough capacity to cope here, but admit understanding more about the transmission of the virus would help.
Some of the work we're doing at the moment is understanding, density of population. So, we have a lot of families in the West Midlands that are large family groups, that perhaps live in smaller properties, maybe in flats. So that may be a factor.
Wally Hames is one of those who have died. His son is preparing for his funeral tomorrow.
Couldn't tell him I loved him. I had to watch the doors shut on that ambulance, and he went alone, and I waved to him, and these nurses are doing an amazing job, and they're trying to be there, medically and support as family in dying moments for people who can't be there with their loved ones,
This family values the support given by the health service, but the Midlands is being described as the next coronavirus hotspot, and with that, a message from Michelle Wright.
You can stay in and save lives. If you can't, I just pray that you stay safe.
Sean Lloyd, BBC News, Birmingham.
Take a brief look at some of the other coronavirus developments around the world today. The US state of New York is on the verge of overtaking Italy for confirmed cases of COVID-19. With almost 132,000 cases, it has 700 fewer than Italy, but with only a third of Italy's population. The United States is now the epicenter of the pandemic. In France, coronavirus deaths have passed 10,000, one of the highest levels in the world. And the authorities in Paris have intensified the lockdown, banning outside exercise during the day. The new rules will come into force between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. from tomorrow. Japan has declared a state of emergency in the capital Tokyo and 6 other regions in an attempt to tackle the spread of the virus. Despite a relatively small number of infections, there are concerns that a sudden rise in cases in Tokyo in the past week could lead to a major outbreak. Now, after heavy criticism in recent weeks of the slow response by banks in supporting businesses, the boss of Britain's biggest lender has defended its response to the coronavirus outbreak. The head of NatWest Group, formerly known as RBS, says it has struggled to cope with the huge call volumes from customers. Chief Executive